is a great pleasure to be here, upright, above the ground, warmed and thawed out, etc., etc. And isn't it a beautiful opportunity just to be sitting where we wanted to be, rather than somewhere else, right? And before we get into our conversation, what I want to remind myself and everybody else as we speak or as I share these thoughts, these are not just for you, but for me as well, because my journey is becoming more profound. As soon as I'm done speaking, I have to go experience them and live them, so it is a wonderful place to be. But before that, I would like to remind the month of March is very important for spiritualism. As the advent of, we have our Modern American Spiritualism, we are celebrating 175th anniversary, so just to recognize, to participate wherever you can, however you can, as a volunteer, as an attendee, or a presenter, however you can. So, how many of us really look forward to the signs of any kind? I think we all do. And even if we don't like to confess that, we do look for some signs, right? And most likely we'll look signs from those that have crossed over or passed on, right? But how many of us do look signs from those that are living? Here's the catch there. Why are we not looking signs from those that are living? What is the difference? One has a body and one doesn't have a body. But they both have spirit and soul. So why shouldn't we be looking for signs from those that are living? But the conversation is going to come back to the sense of sign. We do look for signs, right? Even growing up as a kid, you would understand most of us have gone through some part of schooling and education. And our scorecards were our signs of what we were doing throughout the year. I was just happy most of the time and just passing through, because I got to play, but I got to have another grade. Not that I was a poor student, but maybe sometimes my mind was not in studies as much as it should have been. But that has been a sign growing up to how we were doing. And sometimes that sign had to be verified by the parents that reminded us with different signs how to pay attention to the signs. Are you following? You know, we had a little scolding, or we had a little encouragement. If there was an A, there was a little aha, and if there was not so much of a good grade, then it was a different kind of aha was there. But once again, the signs have always been with us throughout the time. Even if we go back in the primitive times, as we keep going back, there were always signs, you know. Even the animals, while we think humans were not present from day one, if it was only animals, even they were looking for signs, how to hide, how to come out, how to do whatever they need to do. The sun rises, early bird catches the worm is still a saying. And if you are any sort of naturalist, you would know that is the case. They are out and about before anything, before the break of dawn is there. So those signs are always subtly moving through in our lives. What makes it interesting was just preemptively prompted by a small conversation in the dining hall, is we need to look for consistency. And that's where the whole key is in somewhere informing our understanding is what is the consistency. Not one is greater than the other. We are all unique, alike, same, different, all at the same time. But the consistency of the sign is where the key elements, I think, is important to understand. Even in spirit communication, healing, communication, because at the end of it all, everything is a relationship. We are forming relationships at all times. And the one most important needed thing in that is the consistency. If it is not consistent, it's the relationship starts to spit out things that people, circumstances are created, and people have to handle those circumstances. And then we respond accordingly. So talking about the basics is important because those that we communicate with, they have gone through the similar basics as we are dealing while we are doing our time here. Doesn't matter they were in the 1800s or 1600s or 300s. Somewhat the circumstances were no different. You know, they had drought and famine and they had floods and everything. We're still experiencing that. Nothing has really shifted other than the massiveness of humanness is there. But that's a growth and consciousness, but at least it's still consistent in its expansion. Something is getting bigger than what it was. Even that has to be seen consistently. So if anybody likes to study statistics, they're always looking for consistency. In the data, what the data is trying to say is the numbers, and numbers speaks consistently. And if it's not consistent, then the numbers go in the other direction. Even that becomes consistency. We have to keep going in that other direction. So consistencies and signs are a very common theme in our lives. Right? Now if I start to speak to you in a whole different tone and a whole different vibratory language, it will upset you probably. And that is a consistency that you may or may not choose to come again next time if I'm here. That creates a sign language. It's a sense of how I made you feel while I was speaking with you. And that's the whole thing to understand in relationships, that consistency of voice, vibration, is a tremendous thing. And we realize sometimes very aware state of mind, but sometimes we're not even realizing it, we're just responding to it at all times. So, my journey in spiritualism has always been there with me, but it really kick-started after my mother passed on. And her communication was so clear, just like you are probably hearing my voice right now. Or when I was hearing your voice while listening to the song and the recitation of the principle. It was so profound that I could not dismiss it. But was I contained with one experience? No. Her communication happened over several days until it became consistent of what she was talking to me. And there was a communication just directly for me. It was not for anybody else in the family. It was just for me, and just for me alone. And I think over time, it became consistent. Now what also became consistent when I went into my better part of my life's journey, she withdrew, and by that time my father had also passed on, and he was there for a short bit, and he withdrew as well because everything was just moving. It was not that my attention was not towards them. They didn't have a need to be bonding with me or watching me when there was no need to be watched. Maybe they had other things to do on the other side. I do not know because I did not go looking for what they were doing. All I could say was they were not with me. And today, my consistency is if I'm really in a space of emotions or thought, they show up just for saying, we are here. And then it becomes my choice if I seek help or if I muddle my way through whatever I need to figure it out. Because I like to be as human as I am, and I'm really persistent and consistent and making sure I do make wrong choices every once in a while, so I can remind myself, oh, you're still here. You know more than anybody else out there. So I do that, but as soon as I'm in that space, their presence is there. And uniquely, my mother's sign has changed over time. It was one thing, and 2 years ago, she just shifted her sign, and it's a whole different sign. And I will share with you how I see a sign. My understanding of signs, what has become for me. When I see the sign, what is going on in here? Not what they're trying to tell me. They're trying to get my attention in the present moment thought complex. Then I have to take it from there, like what about this is relevant, or what about this needs to be paid attention to. But my learning over time is, if I'm seeing numbers are a very important sign for me. I do see random sequences number, but those random sequences are very peculiarly present there. They're not 1111 for me, it's a whole different range of numbers there, but when they are happening, it's just my sales and pay attention now. And then I'm back into like, what am I feeling, where my mind is, what I was processing right in that moment, and then I pay attention. So I've learned in my experience, my consistency has become, when the sign occurs, what am I feeling? I immediately go into my emotions. I really go into my soul space to see what is it doing, what is trying to create and co-create in life. and then I go from there. They really don't speak to me in terms of they're hanging on a lantern and guiding my way, but they get my attention when it's time to get my attention. And when I miss it, when I lose the consistency of the follow-through, or the throughput, as you would understand, I earn a reward or I pay a price. But there is no way out of it. But I will learn to pay attention. And just yesterday, walking around, just meandering, looking at leaves and the bugs and everything, there was my mom's sign. While my eyes, physical eyes, were engaged in something, my subconscious was processing the thought. And I was like, okay, there's my consistency. She's back again, reminding me to mind my own way. Not be there where it's not the best place to be. And I'm pretty sure you all don't do anything like that, right? You go and do your own journey. But when I communicate to the other side in the professional work or even in studies, etc., I have to create consistency. The meanings could change, but the feeling usually is of being accurate or being iffy or being wrong. There's just a few choices. But that is what the consistency creates. The language, the definition changes, the interpretation can change, but is it making sense or not? That's, I have to keep paying attention once again to my soul, my emotions, how the energy movement happens is in there. So as we communicate to the other side, we put out a lot of demands, we put out a lot of requests and prayers and healing and wants and I need this and all that stuff. And golly, I, as a kid, did a lot of that. I was a good negotiator, I thought I was. And maybe not so much. But I was skilled in drafting my request list. But at the same time, as a young person, not being so familiar with my own emotions, my own intuitiveness, I did not pay attention to the signs. They were happening, but I was not there. But as I grew, matured into my own journey as a professional or even as a spiritualist, at the nitty-gritty of it, I learned to pay attention to where my thought is flowing, where my emotions are flowing. Because when I'm opening myself to the other side, that's how they're rushing through my emotions. The clairsentience is primarily everybody's first strong suit. So it comes through very quickly how I feel. I'm feeling, I feel this. And that's the way you understand what's going on. We are feeling a lot of emotions. We see secondarily, we hear things secondarily, but most of the time, the feeling kickstarts the whole process of communication. Is there. So as we make this journey of communication, where is your life? What is changing within itself? And perhaps your life is very consistent. A little small part of your world is changing somewhere within itself. What is it trying to say to you? Or the other aspect of this is creating controls in our life, what we can control, what we are controlled by, etc. and etc. Is it necessary? Usually my journey has been over many years of self-analysis and self-inquiry. Those controls really doesn't mean anything. They're a waste of time in some ways. If I take the path of least resistance, follow my intuition, keep my attention where it needs to be, I'm quicker somewhere than I'm supposed to be. But if I try to control, manage something, it's usually not the best thing to go by. I speak from my own experience, and that's the part of the journey, is because you are sitting in your own human experience. What about your consistency? What about your science? What about your own inner compass that is telling you something? So we come back to the relationship, because once again, the science, the consistency, and the relationship all are the dynamic part of living communication or communication with the afterlife, right? So in your relationships, once again, are you paying attention? And this is a beautiful space of just bringing it up. If you have family members, it not necessarily has to be personal relationship of intimate kind. Anybody, any family member. What has modified over 10 years? What has modified over 5 years? Are we coexisting? Are we just running in parallel tracks? Or are we talking about things that were silly and easy to talk about? I'm going to bring up that part. As a child, how their imagination runs in their head. It doesn't have any boundary? No. They are limited to their awareness, but does it have any boundary? but they talk about just about anything, what they want to, what they can be, what they're experiencing, how they're putting words, but they're putting the thought and the emotion right to what they're feeling. Once again, the feeling plays is strong. I'm feeling in that space. Now, if we take about a young kid with the parents, inevitably we all have found ourselves, if we have children, to say, well, what are you going to be? Are you thinking about your schoolwork? Are you thinking about what the next step is? But once again, the engagement of what the co-creation or what that feeling or the emotion is. And perhaps the parents are looking for the consistency of sign saying, this kid just gave me a good, confident response. I really don't have to make any corrections. Or maybe this response was an iffy, they need a little bit more guidance. And of course, there are some parents that will tell you like it is what they want you to be, or I'm pretty sure you all have gone through some phase of that. This is how I want you to be. But that's a whole different part of the movement there. But coming into the intimacy part, right, when you're dating or you're seeking each other, at that point, that is a whole different set of conversation, and it progresses over time. And part of me is, even if you don't have a partner, if you don't have anybody like so, have you stopped romancing with yourself in the thought of co-creating through your imagination what feels good, other than just knowing I'm comfortable with this, whatever this is for you, right? Now my part is, I do find myself sitting sometimes and imagining what am I going to do the rest of the year. What places I have opportunity to speak, where am I heading for, where my workshops and engagements are. That's a professional part of that enticement of reminiscing, simmering in that creative place of myself. But the other part is, what am I doing for myself personally? How am I growing within my own skill set? How am I growing? How am I creating growth for myself? And spiritualism is a very contemplative religion. It's a religion based on self-inquiry. If you're not digging deep enough into yourself, if you're just looking for evidence to somebody who's passed on, it's great. But if you're really not working on yourself, spiritualism is really takes you there. It's a very contemplative religion. It's a very contemplative way of life, because it's all about the inquiry. If you really read some good writings, this is all about contemplative thought, from Andrew Jackson Davis to all other pioneers that have gone before. William Steed wrote some excellent work. Being in that altered state of mind where this is just the thought that is creating what is being created, not the demands of life per se. The spiritualism is a very contemplative thought. So our self-growth, where is it coming from? What are we doing with ourselves? How we're fine-tuning our instrument ourselves. So that letting go of things that are no longer serving us also needs to have a little comfort of consistency, saying, now I don't feel that way about a certain thing, it's time to finally pass it through, right? And the part of that is that growth that happens with that part is no different than this beautiful season that's blooming everywhere. It's shedding the pollen like crazy. And everything is just blossoming, and the tiny leaves. And I cannot say, yesterday, as I was mentioning my walk, I discovered 8 different oak trees and 8 different types of bloom they had on different. Each and every one was different. The leaves were different, the flowers were different, the buds were different. But once again, that inquiry of like such a huge variety out there, and I only knew the oak tree that was in my backyard. I just started paying more attention. And once again, that consistency is the key, because our attentiveness expands as well. When we are starting to understand our signs, our growth, as it's leading us to a newer thought, we will see more, hopefully, and more awakening. Spiritualism will lead you to somewhat of a basic value of self-enlightenment, self-awareness, self-awakening. There is no doubt about it. If you stay on that track of self-inquiry and self-discovery, that's all any yogi would say is the sum total of all of the human experiences, to discover thyself. Look within, and there is the kingdom. If you have that orientation, you would understand. Everything is in here. Because the consistency has to set in here too. Otherwise, it's just a thing of the mind, and mind can shift. Just like There are going to be fruit and a couple ones. There will be flowers that we have never seen before. Some genetic mutations are happening that will show me a different bird and somewhere in a tree like I've never seen that bird before. So, but part of that is to understand life is always creating. What are we looking for? It's most likely the consistency. So I'm going to give you one more thought. What makes you feel safe? It is the consistency that makes you feel safe. Consistency of a paycheck, consistency of returning to the same place to sleep or be safe at night, consistency of your resources, you know there will be food on the table, consistency of a pantry that has a food, or even if it's at the bare minimum, even if it's just something very benign and simple, even to have that as a consistency creates a safe place. Now, those that are nomadic by nature, or they have a little gypsy heart and feet, for them, their consistency is to be in one place. But you have to understand, there's different variety of where that comes from. It's not one thing applies to everybody. But that is still a thing to say, where is that consistency? So those people that work out, their consistency, if they don't go to the gym, if they don't go work out, they're missing something from their routine. And that's as simple as that. So, as we unfold this into the part of the spirit side, are you paying attention to your loved ones as they bring the signs to you to communicate with you? And that is also a part of consistency. And I'd really emphasize to the clients or even teaching, please don't settle on one sign. If they gave you one sign, yeah, there's a possibility. But if they can give you one time, they can give you 9, 10 more times. You might as well ask them to create a consistent communication. So 11th time when it happens, then it becomes your second nature. It's like, yeah, mom's going to do that. She's going to ring a bell. Or she's about to knock a bottle off the table. Something. But asking for that set of consistency is very important. And then we build that through our mind, through our mental communication with the other side. Give me a sign, show me things consistently. Is there. So keep looking for those signs, because that sense of connection into the spirit side is absolutely mind to mind in the beginning, then emotions and feelings are right behind it. But it starts there. A lot of times you see the mediums working in our sense of the work. We are following our consistency. And the day we don't have our consistency, you can feel in our work, or you can feel in our demeanor how that is flowing. And since we are right in front of you, pay attention. Is there. And the other part is to learn to respond to the consistency of no, or being wrong, or being not accurate. Right? If something is not working out 100th time in a row, wouldn't it be time to do something different? Same thing. I mean, I spent a glorious 6 weeks with a personal trainer, and I wanted to do it my way, which was the most laziest way you can find. And he was just after me. No, Joy, it's not going to work this way. Joy, it's not going to work this way. And I haven't gone back to him yet because I like my consistency. But it shows. Nothing right or wrong there, but it shows. But we were just having a little moment. But I'm learning what I was doing right. Wrong body mechanics doesn't bring good results. So I'm experiencing that. So in our communication, we have to understand. Now, a lot of times, no's doesn't really mean it's a no. It's something we missed, something we misinterpreted, something we didn't see as a whole picture. But at the same time, I get a chuckle out of it because I sit there and like, so why didn't you give me the second piece of information while the first piece of information was happening 20 minutes ago? Information can come in pieces. So your signs or your continuity of your consistency, right or wrong, whatever this is. Attentiveness is a big thing for us as people that experience mediumship or healing. Because for a healer, the pass-through of the energy or that emotional sense of it went or it didn't go is the big thing, and you will understand that part. So just understand that creating that little momentum is very important. Now, why do I speak about signs and consistency? I have been hearing over the whole 2.5, 3 years, life is changing. But when was it not? And I'm really have to hold myself back, but I expressed today in a proper manner is life is always going to be changing. It's going to change again next year. Forget about it, it's going to change tomorrow. Forget about it, it's going to change today, later in the day. We finish this assembly, life's going to change completely because we're rushing to do whatever we need to be. The life is always changing, but once again, finding the sense of joy within it, finding the sense of your ability to come back to what makes you really tick, rather than what makes you really tick off. Pay attention to what makes you tick. And then stay there, because that is the way you step out of any place that is uncomfortable. Any place that is really not supposed to be there, you will pay attention. And then we continue the sense. Now, we live in a little honeycomb way of life because we live in a society where we are pack creatures. And we have to be flexible. So it is okay to be fat once in a while. And I have an acronym for that, so it's not really means by the weight. It is flexible and adaptable at all times. So you have to be every once in a while have a little cushion to have a little give so that it accommodates wherever you are, right? And a part of that is also a consistent part of life. If you cannot be flexible, you become rigid, and when you become rigid, it brings you close to a breakdown. Either you break down or somebody else will, because of it, will have a breakdown. But flexibility, once again, is a consistent part. We have to be pliable and soft and malleable to adapt with life. And that's very important there as well. So, please read books on spiritualism. Andrew Jackson Davis, Abraham Lincoln, William Steed, Ledbetter, and many more other authors have written some great works. That's all about philosophy. And that's another part what I'm observing within our movement of this religion, and perhaps you will understand in your own simple way. If we don't adapt with time, once again, the rigidity comes into